What's up guys, Shawnthebro here. Today we're looking at the third person tutorial again, and we're going to have pickup items that we can basically walk over to. And I don't have meshes for them, so you see they're just squares, but this is a pistol and this is an assault rifle. And what you're going to be able to do is walk over to them and register that you've equipped them. Since I don't have the meshes, you're not going to actually see any difference, but we do some logging as well as some name changes so that you can see that it's working. And with this, you'll also be able to pick up any kind of item. It doesn't have to be weapons. It could be health that you manually need to pick up, like Halo Reach's health packs. Or it could be some sort of armor, whatever you want. So this could also be used for looting. And basically, it's a proximity system. So once you're close enough to an object, it will trigger the text. And then once you're triggered with the text, you can press a button to actually equip it. I guess we should destroy it once we equip it, but it kind of depends on what you are using it for. So anyway, let's get into it. This is a pretty simple tutorial, but it's going to take a bit of time just because there's a few new classes we need to set up. I wanted to set it up right by making a parent class for all this, so it's going to take slightly longer. Let's get into the code first like we normally would. So go all the way up to the top. We're still working in our Gears of War template character. Now for me, this is my third person template character. So if you've been following the series, you should know that this is just basically your base overridden character when you use the template, the third person template. See, there's a little bit of overhang here. Let me fix that. There we go. So all I did this time in code, again, is pretty simple. Pretty simple. All I did was add a function and a variable. So I added the equip item function. The comment is allows the character to equip an item they are close to. And it's just void equip item. When we end up actually putting the mesh on here, we might have to do some changes to this function to make it a little bit more user-friendly for the developer. That way we can actually use it and determine what object it is that we're equipping in the function itself. But for now, you don't need to know that. And depending on how you do it, if you just want to equip it and then your character gets notified the weapon you have, that's actually fine. You don't need to change this function at all. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're going to leave it like this for now, but it's got room to change. And then you're going to want to make a variable. Is overlapping item is what I called it. I made sure it's edit anywhere and blueprint read write category items. So this boolean is overlapping item determines if we're coming in contact with the item and lets the player know, the character that the class we're in right now in Visual Studio, it lets this character know. The reason I did that is because instead of doing a hack where it's like, oh, get player controller 0 or anything like that, if you want to do this in a multiplayer game, and a lot of third-person games are multiplayer, say Gears of War, the Call of Duty has a third-person mode, you don't necessarily want to just offer up overlapping items to any player. So when one player overlaps with the item, all of them could pick it up. That would be bad. Unless for some reason that's what the intention is. But I can't think of a good case of that right now. So I basically made the character aware that they're overlapping the item as well. That way when we do the check and see if they are overlapping the item, all they have to do is press a button and they can equip it. Okay. So you know the drill by now. If you've been watching these tutorials, you should set your variable, your new variable, in the constructor to its default value, which will be false. And then this is a new input. So we're adding a new input called equip. So you can copy the ones that you've done before for jump, stop jumping, sprint, stop sprinting, whatever. We don't need to stop equipping in this case. You're only going to equip one time. You're just going to press the button. If you release it, great. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to do the release. You could. I wouldn't worry about it. I am not going to actually use it for anything. So, since that's the case here, what we're doing is using the equip action here. We're binding this, and where this comes from is if you go to your edit, project settings, and then input, you can see all your action mappings here with their corresponding keys. So all I did was add a new one by pressing the little plus button, call it equip, and assign it to Q. That's pretty simple, right? Once you do that, Visual Studio will be able to pick up on it when it builds next time. So as soon as you type this in, make sure this is the name of the action mapping that you just made. Mine was equip. Pressed this, and then the character function, the character class function that you want to call. In my case, the function was called equip item. Okay, we're going to go down to equip item. This is the new function that we're making right here. Equip item. And all I do is if we are overlapping an item and we press the key, since the only way you get into this function is if you press the Q key. So basically, if we press the Q key and we're overlapping the item, then say we picked up an item in the log. Now, normally what you would do is have a mesh that you can spawn, or that you can create and or switch out, depending on how you're doing it, in your character's arms, and that way that's how you see if they have the weapon. Since we don't have the weapon classes actually set up, or the item class is actually set up, you know, this could be armor or whatever. Since we don't actually have that set up, I just wanted to log it, actually setting it up and getting a mesh on the character, as well as maybe an animation, like maybe a stance will change to him holding a gun. Then we will do additional logic in here. But for now, just make sure you're getting here. If you're getting here, the rest of it will be a piece of cake. Okay. So, now, to actually make this work, there's a few ways we could do it. I went with a pretty simple way, because, again, people sometimes ask me, like, why'd you do it this way? And that's fine. That's good to know. But some people flat out will be like, that's the wrong way to do it. Don't do it this way. This is terrible. Don't teach people like this. Dude, when I was going through school, we were taught to use tick a lot of the time, okay? Because you have to learn somehow, and you want to learn and see your results, and then you can make it better. So I will be explaining how I did it, why I did it that way, and how we could make it better. So this is not going to be the best possible tutorial, the most optimized ever. This will do everything you need, and it should be one of the easier tutorials that you can see for this kind of thing. I still did want to set up a proper system, though. That way you can take this as far as you want, and it should always work. And what I mean by that is I made a BP item blueprint widget. So if you don't know where that's at, if you go to add new, and actually you can do it, one second. And you can't see it, unfortunately, because the way I'm trying to do it here. But if you were to go down to user interface, right click and go down to user interface, it's widget blueprint at the bottom. I can also show you by doing this, which is add new. And then it's the same thing, you can't see it because my recording capture is too high, unfortunately. But I need it that way for my audio. Anyway, just make a new widget. Not bad. And then what you're going to want to do is simply go into it. And you'll have nothing on the screen. So what you're going to want to add is a text box, which is just equip item is what I put as the default text. But we're going to bind it. So just drag your text box in here. Write whatever you want. You don't have to make it a variable. I did in case I was going to use it later. I don't think I'll end up needing it, but it's fine. Go to content, and then you can bind. If you hit the little plus on the bind, it'll make a function for you and automatically bring you here. And you'll have this node and this node. So we're just going to add these three things. We're going to add something called item name, which we're going to create right here. So just hit plus and add this item name variable. It's a string. And we will be setting that outside of this class when the character is colliding with the object. Because the widget doesn't know what we're colliding with. All its job is to print the text to the screen. So the actors themselves, like the little cubes that we have, are the assault rifle and pistol, as I called them. Those are what's going to send the name to this widget. So just make this variable here. Then drag off of it and hit. You can do append here or just type append after a right click like that. Make sure you're using the string append. And then I just put 3 nodes in here. You can hit the add pin to add more. and then you can right click to remove them. So you can just type whatever you want. The item name, again, is the weapon or the item. So if it's armor or whatever. So equip pistol question mark, like asking you, like it's a prompt. And then just drag this into the return node. It'll automatically make this little 2-text string thing here for you. And then that's it for this widget. That's all you need to do. You could put this on your character HUD, which I thought about doing, but then you have a reliance on your HUD when colliding with objects, which is technically not a good way to do it. And since some people did comment on that sort of thing in the fighting game tutorial, I did want to bring it up here. You can just make a new widget like this and just spawn it and remove it from parent when you're away from it. It's easy enough. It is a little bit costly, but you don't have that dependency on the HUD, and that is a good thing. So now to get back to what I was saying about the base class for items. So for items, I'm just calling them items because, again, armor, health, weapons, whatever. So I wanted to have a base class for this. So I just made a blueprint class. This one I can show you. This guy right here. And I just called it BP item. That's him right there. So in BP item, there's a number of things we're going to do here. But I do want to actually make this a little bit more clear for you guys. So let me change the colors. And I'll leave this in the video so you guys can see how to do that. If you go to your object in the component tab here, you can scroll down. You have a bunch of options you can just change the cube for. I already have some material, so I'm just going to throw a random material on here. Or that's the mesh, my fault. I already have some material, so here they go. So I'll throw on the same ones that we're using for our health and damage for now, since next time I'll have meshes. Sorry. But for now, this will be good. That way you can tell the difference. So if we play it now, there we go. So you can tell this is the pistol. This is the assault rifle. Cool. So, I don't know when this happened. Okay. Oh, they both got like that. Weird. I know I don't need to compile and save every time, but just a habit. So, okay. In our BP item class, all we want to do is inherit from actor. So when you made your blueprint class, this guy, you'll get a little pop-up. Just choose actor. You don't need to read all that. Really, that actor is just saying, this is something that we can interact with and spawn. And that's really all you need to know, because that's exactly what an item is. We're going to want to spawn it. We're going to be able to want to collide with it or overlap with it and pick it up, right? So to make sure you can pick it up, if you go over to the component tab again and click on self, or you can click on the default scene route. For me, I actually did it separately for each object, like the pistol and the assault rifle. But what you should really do is just add a cube here. Like that. And then you can change its size here and all that. And what you'll want to do is go to, from block all dynamic, change this with overlap all or overlap only pawn. I'm using overlap only pawn because I don't need to overlap it with anything else. So overlap only pawn just means that you can walk through it basically, but it still has collision. Like if you were to do block all, you just sit up here against it like this and you couldn't walk through it. So you could still equip it if you were checking for collision with it, but then you would never be able to walk through it, which is honestly kind of ugly. So I probably wouldn't do that, but it could depend on how your game is set up, and I'm trying to place that correctly. Sorry, let me adjust that. There we go. That's what was going on. The Visual Studio window was rearing its head. Okay, so as you can see, though, they're all the same color now, and they're all the same cube because we're not overriding them, which is why I did not do that in the item class. But you probably should have a default there. That way you can see something, because otherwise if you don't have that cube on there, you will see nothing when you spawn your object. Anyway, let me save these again. Alrighty, so what's going on here? we have two events, actor begin overlap and actor end overlap. If you're familiar with the fighting game tutorial, there was an episode on the hitboxes which went over the same basic concept. And I can link it here in the top right if you want to check that out. But basically, all this is doing, and you can right click and just do actor begin overlap. It's this guy right here under collision, and actor end overlap right here. What these are doing is when I collide with the object, when I stop colliding with the object, essentially. Now remember, we switched it to overlap, so it counts as colliding with the object when you're overlapping the object. So anytime I am within this cube or close enough to its cube, you do have a little bit of room for error because it's actual hitbox, or it's trying to think what they call it. It's capsule collider, or cube collider in this case, is a little bit bigger than the mesh that I made. So you can see I'm not actually touching it, but I have access to it. That's probably good. You don't want to necessarily make it too hard to pick up an item where you have to be directly over top of it. So I would leave it like that, but you can change that if you want. All you have to do is go over here and change your size. Change your sizes, or not on this one, on your cube itself, and change your sizes. Easy enough. Okay. So basically, these are anytime you walk into the trigger, or anytime you walk into the actor, and anytime you leave the trigger, or leave the actor. You're going to drag off the other actor object and cast it to your character class. Your character class is the one we're looking for so that they can pick up the item, so it only makes sense to cast it to them. Then you can drag off of your character and set your new boolean that you made is overlapping item, which means yes, we are currently overlapping this item. We can currently pick it up, essentially. Now remember, if any of the variables you made in code aren't showing up in Unreal, make sure you build Visual Studio right here, build solution, and then compile Unreal, or rebuild Visual Studio, and it should auto compile Unreal for you. But there you go. So set that to be true. We are interacting or overlapping our object. Then, since we're doing that, we want to equip item prompt. We want to create that widget. So that widget was this little thing, just the text box that has the bound text. Then we want to call a function that I made called setCorrectItemName. So just press plus, add a new function, go to setCorrectItemName. And for the parent class that I have here, the BP item, I don't do anything in it. So if you're not familiar with overridden functions, or this is still a little ugly, I apologize. It's this Visual Studio keeps popping up. There we go. That looks a little bit better. If you're not familiar with overridden items or functions or variables that are overridden even, what you're doing is essentially you're defining logic that you want children classes to have. So in this case, this is BP item. Well, we don't have, since item encompasses armor, health, and weapons, and there's different types of each of those, like helmet, body armor, like health vial, health pack, and then pistol, assault rifle. You don't know what the name of the item is going to be. But I don't want to necessarily copy this logic and put it in 8 different classes if I have like 8 different items, right? So I can put it all in this BP item class like I've done here. And I can make this function. It's called setCorrectItemName. Now, it might not do anything in here, but if we look at our child classes, which are what these are, it waits for this event to be called and then does some logic. So you could also make this an event instead of a function, for the record. And that's probably what I should have done. But I'm just used to making functions because that's the way I've always done it. And in different versions of Unreal have changed the way events and functions work. And I just kind of never grew out of the way I did it. But you could make this a function or an event. It doesn't matter. But basically, you want some indicator that when this gets called, you want to do logic in your children classes. Okay? If that doesn't make sense, don't worry. We're going to go through it. Do make sure you include the widget reference that we just created. So take the return value from the create widget. Whoops. That is this, by the way, create widget. when you select your class in here, it changes the name. So see, if I have none, it'll look like construct none, and then you select your class, equip item prompt, and it fixes that. Make sure you keep your widget reference in this. So add another variable to your function, plus here, plus new parameter right here. And then find your class. Mine is equip item prompt, and then object reference, which is the first option. Whoops. And there you go. You get to see my Audacity. The reason for doing this is so that we can make sure if there are multiple prompts up, whether it be multiple players, split screen, or just two items that are next to each other that both have the prompt spawning, you have the correct one to set the text for. That's important. So just make sure you pass the widget reference along. And then, after the create, just add it to the viewport right here. You see? You take the return value and just call add to viewport. And so what you're doing is you're going through. If you're overlapping, set it to be overlapping. Spawn the widget. Set the item name, which will be done in the child class, which we'll get to in a minute. And then display that to the screen, basically. You'll be happy to know that the actor end overlap is basically the same exact process, just the exact opposite. So we still want to cast and make sure we're the right character. Because if we're not the right character, then we don't want to do this, right? You could end overlap with anything, but you don't necessarily want to do this logic if you end overlap with like an enemy. So, cast, make sure you're the character. Set is overlapping item to false. We're no longer overlapping with this item, so we don't necessarily want to have the ability to pick it up. Then, get all widgets of class. Equip item prompt. So that's this widget right here. Just do get all widgets of class right here. Find your widget that we spawned prior. Do a for loop with this array going into the array. And then remove it from the parent. You can destroy it and things like that. And that's actually what you should do. Whoops. You actually should destroy this. But as you can see, you don't need to. Which is why I didn't. Because when you remove it from the parent, it basically destroys it. It technically keeps a reference to it until Unreal's garbage collection goes through. But that's not something we're going to get into today. So I would leave it like that. There are ways you can do it. Like we actually have a way at work that we're supposed to do this. Or at least that I've seen us do it. But just leave it like that for now. That was just kind of a more advanced thing that I wanted to let people know that I was aware of. In case you were curious. Okay. Lastly, to finish this off, we're going to make it so you can differentiate your items. That's what this was all for. So we could have a base class to make items for, and then the items would be super easy to pick up. So here's where the fun part begins. So if you're in your blueprints folder like I am now, here's BP item. Go ahead, make a new blueprint class, and all you have to do, go to your all classes, and inherit off of BP item right here. I've already done it for both of these, so you don't need to. Also, if you screwed up and forgot that part, or just have something you want to parent later, you can always go to class settings, look at your parent class, and switch it up. Switch just the BP item. Now, since we did all that logic in BP item, we don't have to copy it 100 times. All we have to do is set the name to the correct name, like I talked about earlier. So if you actually type in the event of this, so I called my function set correct item name. So if I go to pistol and I type in set correct item name, you'll see I can call the function and then I can get the event. I don't want to call the function because that would trigger the parent function. Or it would trigger this event of the function depending on how you set it up. But that's not going to help us. What I really want to do is just search for the event. And then since this is getting called when it gets created, we're going to just literally take the widget reference that we added right here. That's what this is. And we're going to say set item name. And when we do that, you can set your name to whatever you want. I just called this one pistol because that's what the class was. I figured that was good. And I did the exact same thing for the assault rifle, but called it assault rifle. And then you get this result where now these are both basically the exact same class, but because of one change, they're different. And it's more than that, too. So this is just text on the screen. However, now that we have this equipping logic working, I could also search for the mesh that I'm going to put. Oh, it's the pistol. We're going to use a different mesh here, which this is annoying me that this is called Cube 0, by the way. There we go. Did you also do that assault rifle? You did. Because I reparented. There we go. Does that make sense? So now I can change this cube to be whatever I want. Like, if I don't want this to be a cube at all. I'm trying to think what's I can't really see. Left arm. Let's see. So see, you can have a different mesh for your pistol. It's this crazy thing. And a different mesh for your assault rifle. So there you go. So now you can have different meshes, different textures, colors, functionality, all that for your pistol and assault rifle. Also, just to prove that this is working, I'm going to switch this back to a cube because I don't want to see all that every time. Let's look at the output log, and we will clear it. We'll play it, and I'll bring this over to the side, and you can see when we go to pick it up by pressing Q, we picked up an item. And then we picked up an item. So there you go. Then in the next episode, or if you want to go on your own, you can go over here, pick up your item, and then change your mesh, change your weapon that you're holding in your hand, make it so you can shoot, things like that. So there you go, guys. That's how you can equip items and also switch items. Like if you had one equipped, all you'd have to do is drop your other one when you press Q and get this one. And I'm sure we'll cover that in the next episode, so don't worry about it if you're confused about that. But now you can properly equip and pick up items with a key press as opposed to just the collectibles where we run into them. And what I mean by that is these guys. Like these, we just run into them to pick them up. These, you actually have to press a button when you get the prompt. Alright guys, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it. If it helped you out, please subscribe. It lets me know that you are very interested in this series and I can continue to make it. And also just, you know, I really appreciate it more than anything. I mean, it feels good. I get really happy when you subscribe, and I'll keep making more of these videos. Please feel free to ask any specific questions you had about this episode or any episode in general, really. I'll answer them. And feel free to join the Discord. It's in the description. It's a programming Discord, so we have a main chat where you can talk, but you can also ask your programming questions there, and there's more than just me who can help you out in the chat. So it's great to see the community coming together to talk to each other as well. Okay, guys, so again, I'm Shawnthebro. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode for the fighting game character select tutorial. Goodbye, my friends.